At the Battle of Bac Thang River in 938, the Vietnamese forces, led by Ngo Quyền, defeated the invading forces of the southern Han state of China and put an end to centuries of Chinese imperial domination in Vietnam. It took place at the Bac Thang River, near Ha Long Bay in northern Vietnam. In 937, Liu Yan, the southern Han ruler, took the chance to intervene in Vietnam again after the death of the Annam Lord Protector Duong Thinh Nghe. He had been foiled by Duong Thinh Nghe in 931, but now that Duong Thinh Nghe was dead, he thought the time was ripe for another attempt. He placed his own son, Liu Hongsao, in command of the expedition, naming him Peaceful Sea Military Governor and King of Giao. He hastily assembled an army at Sea Gate, where he personally took charge of the reserve force. He ordered Liu Hongsao to embark the army and sail to Giao. By the time Liu Hongsao arrived in Vietnamese waters with the Southern Han expedition, Liu Hongsao's plan was to ascend the Bac Thang River and to place his army in the heart of Jacannato Chao before disembarking. The Bac Thang was the major riverine route into the Red River Plain from the north. Ngo Quyền anticipated this plan and brought his army to the mouth of the river. He had his men plant a barrier of large poles in the bed of the river. The tops of the poles reached just below the water level at high tide and were sharpened and tipped with iron. When Liu Hongsao appeared off the mouth of the river, Quyền sent out small, shallow draft boats at high tide to provoke a fight and then retreat upriver, drawing the Chinese fleet in pursuit. As the tide fell, the heavy Chinese warboats were caught on the poles and lay trapped in the middle of the river, whereupon they were attacked by Ngo Quyền forces. More than half the Chinese were drowned, including Liu Hongsao. When news of the battle reached Sea Gate with the survivors, Liu Yan wept openly. He collected what remained of his army and returned to Canton. This victory ended China's long domination of Vietnam and began a period of Vietnam's independence until the conquest by Ming China. Ngo Quyền tactic would later be reused by Trn Hung Thao in a battle at Bac Thang River against the Mongols in 1288. Background: in 931 AD, Duong Thinh Nghe defeated the Southern Han Army, one of the 10 kingdoms near Tin Hai Quan, and achieved the independent status of the Vietnamese at Tin Hai Quan. He named himself Giadushi. In 937 AD, Thinh Nghe was killed by Kiu Kong Tien to revoke the Giadushi title. Thinh Nghe's son-in-law and also his general, Ngo Quyền, mobilized his army to revenge Kong Tien. Feared of Ngo Quyền, Kong Tien requested help from the Southern Han. Therefore, Emperor of Southern Han, Liu Yan took his chance and prepared to invade Tin Hai again. Liu Yan claimed that if Duong Thinh Nghe was dead, then Tin Hai Quan would be out of good generals. He ordered his ninth son, Liu Hongsao, to become Bin Hai Tuong Quan and Giao Kai Vuong. He commanded the naval forces of Southern Han into Giao Kai, executing the protesters. In the year 938 AD, after calling of all the soldiers in the nation to his side, Ngo Quyền led his army from Ai Chau to the north to kill Kiu Kong Tien. Kong Tien was surrounded by Ngo Quyền army and could not resist. He waited for the reinforcements of Southern Han. The Emperor of Southern Han, Liu Yan, gave his son Liu Hongsao the title Tin Hai Quan's Giadushi. Then Hongsao's title was changed rather prematurely into King of Giao. He led over 20,000 troops into Giao Kai in the name of Kong Tien's reinforcements. Liu Yan asked Chongwin's courtier for advice. Ik said, the Han Emperor wanted to move fast and quickly reconquer Tin Hai, so he didn't listen to the advice of Taiyu Ik. He ordered Hongsao to lead his army into the river of Bac Thang immediately. Emperor Liu Yan, as a general himself, stayed at Haimen as an alternative reinforcement. While Liu Yan was mobilizing his army, Go Qian marched to Taila to kill Qiu Kongtian. Kongtian at that time, completely surrounded by Go Qian's forces, and was killed before the Southern Han's reinforcements march into the borders of Vietnam. The pole and tide tactic. Go Qian knew that Hong Sao was coming, and told his generals. Go Qian ordered his soldiers to nail the iron-headed poles under the waters of the Bac Thiecheng River. At high tide, the poles would be covered with water, and thus remain unseen by the Chinese. Go Qian intended to lure the enemy into this area when the tide was up. When the tide was down, the enemy's boats would be stranded, and be easy targets for attack. On a late winter day in 938 AD, on Bac Thiecheng River, the entire Han's naval fleet led by Hong Sao entered Tin Hai. The southern Han's soldiers, seeing the small ships of Go Qian, aggressively marched in, thinking that they could easily defeat the small force of Go Qian. Go Qian ordered his army to retreat upstream. He waited until the tide lowered and ordered his army to fight back. The big ships of southern Han were stranded and penetrated by the poles. At that time, Go Qian used all of his forces to attack. The southern Han's army lost the battle and retreated. Liu Hong Sao and more than half the force was killed by the Vietnamese. The emperor of southern Han was leading his army at the borders, so he could not respond to the situation. Hearing the news that Hong Sao was dead, Liu Yang was horrified, and ordered his remaining forces to retreat, created Vietnam's Go dynasty, set his capital at Silo. Later, in Battle of Bac Thiecheng, Trn Hung Thao would reuse this tactic to win against the Mongols. Tactics. The military tactics used by Go Qian were original, as Le Vang Hu described. Great tactic, good combat, incomplete history of Thai Viet. However, according to militarists, applying the pole and tide stratagem to inflict damage upon an enemy navy required the successful combination of two factors. First, lure the enemy past the poles when at high tide as the poles are hidden. Second, know the tide and calculate the time when the tide ebbs, and ensure the enemy ships are above the poles at this point, causing them to be impaled on the poles and sunk. These two processes were integrally linked, for if the enemy came in at low tide, they would have seen the poles. But if low tide did not come in time, Liu's boats would have easily sailed over the poles. This is the situation that the militarists of Vietnam recorded of Battle of Bac Thiecheng, that the Song's army passed the poles and forward into the land without obstacles. Trn Hung Thao also understood the requisites behind this tactic, and applied them successfully in pushing the Mongol army out of the Bac Thiecheng River. Using poles to destroy ships is not easy to pull off. It is no coincidence that both Go Qian and Trn Hung Thao are considered great generals in the history of Vietnam. Significance of the battle. The great victory at Bac Thiecheng, 938, has an important signification to Vietnam, because it ended 1,000 years of first Chinese domination of Vietnam in history of Vietnam, opened up an independence age for the nation of Vietnam. The victory of Bac Thiecheng is the victorious final of Vietnam in the fighting the Chinese's domination and assimilation to retake the independence of Vietnamese as people. The full great meaning of this victory can only be seen in the background of the 17 years-long eclipse. Moreover, in those 1,000 years, the enemy of the Vietnamese people is a large empire, one of the highest military positions in the Eastern Asia, with the Han's expansionism as being increasing at its highest rate, especially under the Eastern Han dynasty, Tang dynasty. Continuing the expansion of Qin Shi Huang, the Han dynasty successfully conquered northern Korea and the nomads in the north, expanded its borders to Middle Asia and invaded the countries at the southwestern. In the 7th century, the Sui conquered today's Taiwan, Giao Chao, and Tao Quc. The Tang dynasty expanded in all directions. formed a vast empire as Emperor Taizong of Tang declared, "I have conquered more than 200 kingdoms, pacified both four directions. The Daimans at the far land have to come here and serve me." From the first days after Anno Domini, the population of Han's empire was over 57 million. At that time, the population of Vietnam was just over 1 million. After having conquered Vietnam, the plot of the Han dynasty not just stopped at destroying the national sovereignty, exploiting the people, scavenging the treasures of Vietnam, but also assimilate the entire Vietnamese people forever, annex the lands into China. The Chinese's assimilation plan, as a feature of Han's expansionism, was used from the Han's dynasty to the Tang. In the entire history of Vietnam, this is one of the most dangerous and destinying time that the Vietnamese people must pass. Ngo Quyền, the hero in the great victory of Bac Thang in 938, is the king that has rebuilt Vietnam, king of the kings, as the Thai Viet's Kentucky Tôn Thu described. Phan Boi Chau said, "He is surely worthy with the title, the mid-ancestor, of Vietnamese people." After victory of Bac Thang, Vietnam entered a new age to rebuild the country in large scale. That is the age of the modern Thai Viet, a Thang Long's traditional, the age of defeating the Song, defending against the Mongols, liberating against the Ming, a golden age of Lai dynasty, Trn dynasty, La dynasty. Historian Ngo Thic described